if we look to the answer as to why for so many years we achieved so much, prospered as no other people on earth, it was because here in this land we unleashed the energy and individual genius of man to a greater extent than has ever been done before. Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth. The price for this freedom at times has been high, but we have never been unwilling to pay that price. Those who say that we're in a time when there are no heroes, they just don't know where to look. The sloping hills of Arlington National Cemetery, with its row upon row of simple white markers bearing crosses or stars of David, they add up to only a tiny fraction of the price that has been paid for our freedom. Each one of those markers is a monument to the kind of hero I spoke of earlier. Their lives ended in places called Belleau Wood, the Argonne, Omaha Beach, Salerno, and halfway around the world on Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Pork Chop Hill, the Chosin Reservoir, and in 100 rice paddies and jungles of a place called Vietnam. Under one such marker lies a young man, Martin Treptow, who left his job in a small-town barber shop in 1917 to go to France with the famed Rainbow Division. There on the Western Front, he was killed trying to carry a message between battalions under heavy artillery fire. We're told that on his body was found a diary. On the flyleaf, under the heading, "My Pledge," he had written these words: "America must win this war. Therefore I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure. I will fight cheerfully and do my utmost as if the issue of the whole struggle depended on me alone." We must realize that no arsenal or no weapon in the arsenals of the world is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women. It is a weapon our adversaries in today's world do not have. It is a weapon that we as Americans do have. Let that be understood by those who practice terrorism and prey upon their neighbors. As for the enemies of freedom, those who are potential adversaries, they will be reminded that peace is the highest aspiration of the American people. We will negotiate for it, sacrifice for it. We will not surrender for it now or ever. We are Americans.
Well, when you went in, they treated you rather harshly. The very first day you were up for about 24 hours, and you had all your hair cut off and all that good stuff. And everybody was screaming at you, you know, and told you you were lower than, as the term was, whale shit. And you can't get any lower than that because you were a private in the United States Marine Corps.
When at my age, when guys were in high school, everybody felt like we had an obligation to do for our country, and that was to serve time in the service. So you had an option to either wait and be drafted into something that you didn't know where you were going to do, or to join something that you would like to belong to. CBs are construction battalions. I became a steel worker. Then I was handpicked for a special unit, and then we got started going through some training in Parris Island and various camps and jungle warfare and stuff.
Hello. I've always been a nurse. From the time I was 9 years old, I've decided to be a nurse. I just never wanted to do anything else.
I spent a time deployed to Iraq back in 2004, 2005. At that time I was in Army intelligence, so I dealt a lot with what they call human intelligence, as far as dealing with the local population and trying to get information that we needed to, provide safety for our troops. A lot of insurgents planting roadside bombs and, firing mortars at our base and rockets and things like that. So, the actual Iraqi army was defeated at that point, but, the insurgency was our big problem.
I joined because I anticipated being drafted, and I wanted to work in electronics because that's what I'd been studying in college. My MOS was nuclear weapons electronics maintenance and calibration specialist.
When I got out of college, my first duty station was Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Then we deployed from Fort Sill to Baghdad for a year. I was a convoy commander. It was my job to secure a load from point A to point B. We were in Baghdad, right outside of Baghdad at an international airport, so we could get all the biggest loads came through there, all the primary supplies for just about all the remote posts that there were. And we had these big trucks that were able to haul off-road, 10-wheel trucks, 10-wheel drive, all wheels were powered axles. We could deliver anywhere, we could deliver in places tanks couldn't go.
Yeah, when I left for active duty, it was just me. I told my mom and dad bye, and I got on the plane. So, it wasn't that big of a deal for me to go. I left friends and people that, I'd spent my whole life with. My mom cried, but, I called her quite a bit. And then I was in there with guys who left wives and kids and everything. They were crying every day, but I just never experienced that. Now, later on, when the war broke out, I'd been married about 3 months, and I got orders to go to the desert in Kuwait, and my wife had to leave my wife then, so she wasn't too happy about me having to go.
I was a patrol leader, team leader, and when we got sent to Vietnam, I had a 5-man team, and we went out on missions to get information, whatever we could come up with. They would set us out in a jungle by a helicopter and leave us there for 5 days or until we initiated the enemy. Once we initiated enemy with just a 5-man crew, they had to send us help and then get us out of there.
Everybody wants real exciting stories. The reality of a combat deployment is it's mostly boring. I've never been to prison, but I can't imagine it's a whole lot different. You have no choice. You can't make any choices of your own. You can't say, I'm going to go for a bike ride. That's not an option. The closest we got is we could go fishing in Saddam's lake one time. But you couldn't eat the fish.
I celebrated my 21st birthday in Parris Island, South Carolina, in a military base, which wasn't the most fun place to be, but that's what we did. You grew up a lot. You were living with 75 guys, 24/7. And so, I don't know, I think you matured a lot. And you found out the world was not high school.
Even though we did, work in the deep desert and the places where we weren't friendly, you never really knew who to trust and who to not trust. I can tell you a couple of stories. One is when we were going into the country, we were flying in, and I remember the briefing they gave us on the plane. They said, we need to be vigilant, we need to be aware, because there is a confirmed truck bomber in the area that's loose, and they've lost contact with them. They didn't know where they were. So we knew as soon as we came off the plane or when our plane touched ground, we were a target. We were a target there, we were a target when we were moving to our first base. I've got pictures here of we had nothing but sandbags and machine guns at all 4 corners. And there was a perimeter set up with wire, and that was where you were safe. But it was still, one, rocket propelled grenade away from blowing you up, blowing the tent up you were in. And they would lob things occasionally, and we'd get through them.
Were you
On D-Day, we heard planes all night long, planes were going over, and we had never heard that before.
And I wound up in Cuba for this Cuban deal, and during the Cuban deal, it had went down, and I was in a foxhole one night, and a guy came by and said, got a little problem for you here. Said, your mother just died, and I'm locked down on an island, and I can't move for 2 weeks. So they come by one night, and they said, we're going to shoot you across the bay and get you out of here. So they had handed me some clothes, don't know whose they were. And so I put this outfit on, and they shot me across the bay and put me in a plane and started. Well, before I went on the plane, they said, Red Cross said, we cannot let you leave Cuba until you get enough money to get from Norfolk, Virginia to Evansville, Indiana. So they had a poker game going in the hangar there, and the boys took enough money out of their poker game to get me from Air Force to get me a plane flight. I come home, and my mother was not dead. So I called my commander. Now we're a small unit. We're a small hand-picked unit. So I called him and I said, she's not dead. So he said, well, stay there till she dies. So I buried her on the 24th of December, Christmas Eve. And I called him, and he said, well, hang loose. I'm going to give you a new number and send you to Nam and let you run gunboats. So then he called me back about a week later and said, I was very lucky because I didn't have enough time to go to Nam. I was getting out of the service.
About a week and a half before we came home, a good friend of mine was actually killed when a roadside bomb went off and pierced his vehicle and went through him, and the vehicle caught on fire and he burned up. So that was tough to deal with. You know, I was there for a whole year. We made it through without any major problems until that happened.
Combat is something I don't wish on anyone. It still sticks with me, and it's been over 50 years ago. So I wish there would never be a situation where any young man would have to be in combat. You were so scared. I was so scared first time on the ground that I didn't sleep for 3 days, and then we contacted with the enemy and initiated a firefight, and then we had to be taken out. So yeah, after that it got a little easier once I learned the jungle. And of course I was highly trained. I was an Army Ranger, so I was quite a bit above a regular infantryman.
When I took care of German prisoners, we had a group of them. When we'd walk through there were German prisoners instead of our own boys, and when we would walk through the ward and watch them, we could tell who understood English just by watching their eyes. We could tell that they understood us. At night they would sing. Oh, and it was so beautiful to hear them singing. And when we get through walking the ward, we'd say, we let them sing, but we know our boys can't sing. We took care of them just like we would of our own.
What I was dealing with was during the Cold War. So majority of our of nuclear weapons that the military had were to counteract Russians. Although when I got out of school, I was sent to Fort Riley, Kansas, which was an infantry base. I was a little bit confused as why they sent me to Fort Riley, because they didn't have any missile batteries or depots or anything like that. And when I arrived there, the unit that I joined didn't have a knowledge of why they were there. And at one point I had a secondary weapon, an M79 grenade launcher, which we identified as being a Vietnam oriented weapon, so that made us suspicious of what our mission might be. And
so what was your mission?
well, we were never told. I was there 8 months and nobody ever told me what my mission was. However, 4 of us went to lunch one day, chow, and then we had time before we had to go back to our duty section, and we went to our day room. And it was a press conference on television. It was President Nixon, and a reporter asked President Nixon if we'd ruled out the use of nuclear weapons in Vietnam. And he said, no, we have not. And all 4 of us immediately assumed that's what we were training for because of what we were doing.
I was around when some rockets and mortars went off and things, but I didn't have any like super close calls. You know, I wasn't engaged in firefights, you know, so to speak. So, you know, I didn't have that PTSD thing going on that a lot of people did, or at least not to an extreme amount. When I remember coming back, and you know, for the first month or 2 I was back home, I'd be driving down the expressway, and I'd look up and I'd be scanning bridges, you know, seeing if there was anybody on the bridges, and I'd be looking for, you know, trash bags on the side of the road. You know, that was just, you know, they'd plant bombs in those and things. So, you know, it took me a while to come down off of my alert level.
Over my shoulder, this is where we were in Kuwait, and they had little mini, they were like pyramids, and they kept all of their aircraft in those pyramids. And you can see what looks like vines hanging down is actually rebar, it's steel. And the bomb that went through, it looks like a good 10 feet of concrete up there, and detonated inside the building, and the walls were black, and you could see the imprints of bodies where they were blown against the walls in there. And you know, that's something that, you know, you don't forget, and you don't just pass by it slightly. It puts an impression on your soul, you know, that when the seriousness of it, when we make a decision for combat, not just for us, but for the other lives, you know, everybody's life's important, but it's our job at that time to do that, because, you know, then we were helping the Kuwaiti people who had, you know, basically been imprisoned by the Iraqis. They were taken over, and you know, we helped them out.
The strange thing is you get really used to the things that you probably think are real exciting. You know, my first day in Baghdad was just before Thanksgiving, and they just had a mortar attack there that blew up this truck, and we're looking through all of the damage and stuff, and you know, we're thinking this is serious. Then I remember standing in line for a Thanksgiving meal, and a rocket flew over our head and hit the barracks where other people were sleeping just hours before. You know, that was just, I'd been in Baghdad for a couple hours at that point. That was, you know, it was strange. Had that happened 3 or 4 months later, it probably did. I don't even remember. It became every day. That I remember that one because it was the first one. After that, we got mortared every day, rockets all the time. It got to the point where the mortar alarm would go off and we wouldn't even put our fork down while we were eating lunch. We hauled bulletproof BMWs and Mercedes for the CIA one time, and everybody you delivered to in the CIA, their name was always John. We got shot at all the time, but you know, to me, that wasn't really that interesting.
One school I went through was I had to carry a needle that if I got caught, I was to put it in my leg and kill myself right then, because it would be better that than the torture I would receive.
I can tell you what my mission was. They would send us in the jungle, helicopters, and we would go looking for trouble and try to gather intelligence or initiate contact to disrupt the enemy movement. Was basically our primary mission was to harass and interdict.
They didn't teach us to put intravenous in our arms and give medications. And then one night they said, they came along and they said so-and-so needed a intravenous medication. And I had never been taught how to give an intravenous medication. He says, "You do it." What was I going to do? I did the medication and it worked out. So sometimes you just had to do what you had to do, whether you knew how or not.
In subsequent research after I got out of the surface, I think that unit was in place just in case we wanted to put nuclear weapons in Vietnam. I've also theorized that we may have been in place as a paper lion, that we were just in place to scare other people, that maybe we existed just as a threat, that they really didn't intend to use us.
We actually thought this invasion was going to be a joke. So some of my friends and I decided that we would pick a person and he would go in the base police station and go up on top and unhook their siren. And we was to get back, this person was supposed to get back down and steal a Jeep and get away. And so we was having fun with it because we thought it was a joke. And so that was a fun deal. And I happened to have been the person to go up on top.
Did you get away with it?
Yeah, I didn't get court-martialed, I'll put it that way.
So your paranoia still affects you every day?
Pretty much.
Is there any way that you deal with that, methods that you use?
Actually, I was in counseling from 1996 on, and that helped a lot because my counselor was a Vietnam veteran, and he was in intelligence over there. So we had a lot of good talks. Helped me with my situation quite a bit.
Was it considered unmasculine to get help or do therapy?
Yes, yes. That's just something that I never considered.
So what did your husband do in the military?
He was, he was a cook, I think.
Yes. On the USS Peleus.
Oh, yeah.
He was at Pearl Harbor when it was bombed.
Yeah.
But then his ship, he was in the South Pacific after that for the rest of the time. But he was on a sub-tender. He did not want Mom to go into the service. She wrote him a letter, and Mom, do you want to continue the story?
Well, I wrote him and told him I wanted to join the service. And he wrote me a letter back. It was a normal size page, but all there was on the page was 2 letters, N-O.
But this spunky redhead did it.
But I didn't.
No, I didn't listen to him.
I didn't listen, and I went in service anyway. And then, as I say, we were separated for 3 years, and we wrote letters, but that was about it.
I remember we were working on in a Nike Hercules missile, and as a self-destruct lead assembly that goes onto a warhead so that if it's misfired, they can send a signal and blow it up without having a nuclear explosion. And they took that off, and it has it's explosive. And they had a table, and it has a foam pattern that you lay it in when you have it out. And a clerk came down and was putting a sign on the wall, and he took a big roll of tape and put it on, and he took the tape and threw it, and it went right for the self-destruct lead, which could, and Ray went, paused for a second, but it bounced off the foam, and then they yelled at him, Another time a guy dropped a wrench inside a missile and it was bouncing down toward their thing, and somebody else stuck their hand through one of the things and caught it. probably nothing would have happened, but you never know.
So this one is where some people, I don't know who they were, you know, swiped a life raft from the Navy and made a swimming pool out of it in the deep desert. So those things happen. This is me out in the Kuwaiti desert, right here. And I can see, you know, this many years later, I haven't changed. This is my home when I was in the desert, and you can see it's sandbags and machine guns, and here's the American flag, and this is the Kuwaiti flag right there on that base we were at. That was Al Jabar, Kuwait.
You know, I had a friend, he was from Evansville. I used to work with him, and he retired, and he left, he retired here in Evansville to go become a military contractor, and he was in Iraq, very close to the area I was at. So when I got over there, I made contact with him, and you know, we met up a couple of times, and there was a day that we were supposed to meet up, and he didn't come. And about that same time, I saw the area where he was stationed had been blown up by a car bomb. And so, you know, I was scared to death that something had happened to him. And I was able to call him, and I said, "Hey, are you okay?" "Yeah, why?" I said, "Well, the place that you work got leveled by a car bomb today." And he's like, "Really?" He said, "Our convoy got canceled." And I don't remember what the reason was it got canceled, but you know, it was one of those things that kind of touched close to home for me. It was, you know, that was someone that I knew from home that was there that, you know, for whatever reason didn't go on that convoy that day, and as a result, he was okay.
The Vietnam veterans were not accepted back home in the United States by the public, general public.
How did the public treat you?
Very bad. Matter of fact, they told us when we hit stateside or we got home, don't wear your uniform, because the general public had a bad image of the Vietnam veterans. They would actually spit on you. Come back home was not well received, so I was pretty bitter for a long time. When I got home, the general public, I didn't trust anyone but family. When I go to a restaurant to eat, I need to be where I'm at right now with my back to the corner.
In my position, like I said, I worked on aircraft weapons systems, and you know, we did aircraft electronics. We specialized in bombs, missiles, fuses, all of those really nasty things. Yeah, because we did that, I held a top secret security clearance, and I learned things that to this day I can't talk about. But I see them on TV, but I still can't talk about them.
The media was 100% involved, and at fault as far as I'm concerned. They just like to highlight things to, I guess, sell their product, the media.
You know, you turn on the news and the news reports one thing. Well, you know, I was in the intelligence job, so I was privy to a lot of information that, you know, the general public isn't. And I see what the news was reporting versus what I saw firsthand, and the two didn't line up. And so, you know, it kind of opened my eyes to the fact that, you know, people have an agenda sometimes, and they're not actually reporting the truth.
You say you knew stuff that the general public did not. Is that still classified, or is that classified?
Still yes, classified,
so you cannot talk about that?
Correct.
Okay, that's cool.
25 years. Get with me in another 10 years and we can talk. I was kind of ready to close that chapter of my life. You know, I was missing Boy Scout campouts, I was missing ball games and plays and all the things. So, you know, I'm glad that's over.
It was a fun when we came back. I remember it's the only party I ever had. It's the only party my parents ever kind of put on that I remember when I came back.
My husband hadn't re-enlisted, and we had been separated for 3 years. He didn't know where I was. I didn't know where he was. And so I just said, no, I want to get home to be with my husband.
At that time, people weren't very friendly to you in the airports and things like that, because of depending on who they were. You know, there's a lot of resistance to the Vietnam issue, and I was in during the peak of the Vietnam era. I'm a Vietnam era soldier, even though I was a Cold War soldier. I was in during Vietnam era. And you could get on an airplane in your uniform and nobody say a word to you. You sit down next to somebody and they wouldn't even talk to you. I didn't experience what the guys coming back from Vietnam experienced. Some of those had terrible reception when they got home after they'd been in battle and everything else. But I did sense a cold shoulder when you were in airports and stuff like that. When I came home, my family was excited that I came home. I didn't have any problem there. I was associated with supporting of the Army Air Defense Command, which had anti-aircraft and anti-missile missiles situated around the country. That's where I worked with mostly with the Nike Hercules missile system, and we supported that. The Nike Hercules, if those were fired, the only reason they would have been fired was because there were incoming bombers or missiles from the Soviet Union coming over the horizon. So if we fired, that meant we were in big trouble.
We did it because we felt we had to. Helping others was always the main part of our work. We always took care of people, and whether they were our own or whether they were, like I say, prisoners.
They said you're guaranteed 1 hour sleep a day and 1 meal a day.
The thing with this country, we take a lot of things for granted. We take our freedom for granted, and we shouldn't, but we do. And if you've never been confronted, you take your police force and everything, like you take them for granted. That should always be there. Well, when you need them, then you where are they? But if you don't need them, you think, oh well, everything's going along okay, and that's not always the case. Unfortunately, a lot of people want something for nothing, and so if somebody promises them something for nothing, they think that's a good deal. It's not always a good deal. You give up something, your freedom, it's not worth it.
We have always been willing to pay a price for what's right. We've always been willing to give of ourselves, even if it means the giving of our lives. So once you've and every soldier, sailor, airman, every man and woman that's put on a uniform, they're willing to pay that price when they put that uniform on. Don't want to, but they're willing to, because freedom's worth it.
Maybe somebody was a cook in Vietnam, for instance, and they never went out in the jungle. They never went on patrol. If you say, well, tell me about your battles or whatever. Well, if he says, well, I was a cook, well, now you're saying his service wasn't important. Is how it makes some people feel. So I've never felt uncomfortable talking about my service, but I've just been pretty open. Like I usually wasn't the guy, behind the 50 cal. I was the guy on the radio. It was dangerous, no doubt. It was dangerous, and scary at times and whatnot, but I knew what I was getting into.
The folks that I associated with, if they said they had your back, you could take it to the bank. That's just the way it was, because your life depended on the other fella, vice versa.
18-year-old boys, nothing's bad to them. You just have fun. You do whatever you think is, whatever your buddies do.
And some of those guys I still know and still see. So, not really close relationships, but nice friends. The Marine Corps has always had high esprit de corps, and you would make sure you protected your friends and your fellow Marines. And that was a value that I don't know that if I probably had some of that before, but probably reinforced that as you went forward.
It changed me because when people talk about emergencies or crisis, that the days we had there, not all of them, but we had a few days that were genuinely a crisis. You weren't really sure if you were going to make it to sundown. That's a bad day. Since then, we have things that, at work or at home, and people say this is a crisis. that's not a crisis. We're all going home alive. It's just a period of excitement. So I think what military experience does for you, especially when you're in combat zone, is it grounds you.
There's a poem that I had seen, and as a matter of fact, it's on my cigarette lighter. I used to smoke. On the one side, it's got a Ranger tab on it. On the other side, it's got this poem. It says, "You haven't lived until you have almost died. For those who have had to fight for it, life has a flavor the protector will never know." Now, if you digest them words, you can understand what I'm saying.
You don't really know how good you've had it until you've had it bad. And living in a combat zone is pretty bad. When I got out of the Army, my biggest fear was that was where I peaked. I didn't want my military service to define me and be, you know, say, well, I was in the military, so now that's the pinnacle of my life. If that was the case, I should have stayed in. I feel like I constantly challenge myself to do the uncomfortable thing.
Everybody's different, you know. Everybody's got a point that that you don't want to push, but some of them are deeper than others. But all of us have a point. When they say war is hell, they're telling you the truth. Because if they take a little child and fill him full of explosives, and he walks towards you, what are you going to do? You'll become an animal you didn't think you could, I'll tell you that. You become one of them. You become an animal right with them.
Why do you think you become an animal?
Because when you see what is done there to your friends, you'll become an animal. You just do it, and part of that is hard to release when you get out of the service and come back.
These wars stretch on for so long is that, you know, we're fighting against an enemy that doesn't have any rules, and we're playing by a very strict set of rules. Too strict in my opinion. People in the military are just doing their job. They're not writing the policies. They're not causing the wars. They're just, you know, doing their job.
You see that?
The cigarette?
Camouflaged 100%. Okay. And everything I'm carrying except for, I had I had 8 meals, and they were dehydrated. Call them alert prices, long range patrol. And you added water to them, and they were edible. They weren't good, but they were edible. But you see, I carried 40 magazines of M16. That's my M16 rifle. Mm-hmm. Okay, 40 magazines, that equals 800 rounds of M16. 13 hand grenades. You can see them hanging different places. Smoke grenades, tear gas. 13 quarts of water that we couldn't get water resupply. We got no resupply. Like I said, when we initiated contact with the enemy, they came out, gave us support, and got us the hell out of there. Listen, not too many people see this. I'm going to let you know, you don't understand what the different awards, the silver, the bronze, Distinguished Service Cross, but I'd like for you to read this, and your dad's welcome to read it too. This is one of the contacts I was in, and that's the reason for the Silver Star.
Award of Indiana Distinguished Service Cross. The following award is announced. Turner Vincent W., Sergeant, United States Army, Company D Ranger, 151st Infantry, awarded the Indiana Distinguished Service Cross. Day action, 13th of July, 1969. Reason, Sergeant Turner distinguished himself by gallantry in action while engaged in military operations involving conflict with an armed hostile force on the 13th of July, 1969, while serving as leader of a reconnaissance team with Company D Ranger, 151st Infantry, in the Republic of Vietnam. On this date, while set up in an ambush position, his team spotted 3 enemy troops approaching. Although he knew that the troops might be the lead element of a large enemy unit, Sergeant Turner decided to initiate contact with them and attempt to take prisoners. After a brief firefight, he directed several of his men to make a sweep of the area. When they came under fire from their flank, he exposed himself to the hostile fusilade to regroup the element so that gunship assaults could be called in. Soon the enemy fire had been silenced, and he moved his men out again to search the area. When the friendly element came under automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenade fire from another hostile force, Sergeant Turner again exposed himself to the enemy fire in order to direct helicopter gunship fire on the enemy positions. While the search element continued to search the contact area, he directed the remainder of the team in placing suppressive fire on the hostile force. He then led his men to a landing zone where they were safely extracted. Interrogation of a prisoner taken during the operation revealed valuable information regarding enemy activity in the area. Sergeant Turner's courageous and resourceful leadership and devotion to duty were in keeping with the highest traditions of the military experience and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army, the Indiana National Guard, and the state of Indiana.
First time I've heard somebody read that. Believe me, you're the first person that's read this.
In Israel, it is mandatory for any boy, the men and the women have to serve in the military for a certain period of time. It's a growing up experience. It's not all bad. I think some of our young people today should do that, but it's probably not going to happen. And I think the future's got a lot. The United States has got a great future with a lot of great young folks coming on.
All I can say is I'm glad that they train 18-year-old boys to do these things, because a 35-year-old man would probably say no. You know, boys will do things. They don't know no different. We didn't know no different. I'm proud to have been in the service. I'm proud to have served my country. And if I had to do over again, I would probably go right in.
So some way you got to serve your country. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the military. You know. So if you, as a family person, you're serving your country. If you raise your children, you raise your family. So that's another way to serve. There's a lot of ways to serve the country. It doesn't necessarily have to be military.
My mother was a very wonderful mother. She wanted us right by her. We didn't tell her that we volunteered. We were called. She never knew that we actually volunteered our services.
I'll be honest with you, I think the Vietnam era caused the American public to accept the veterans that are coming home today than when they came home from Vietnam.
Veterans are people too. Most veterans, when they get back, they just want to be a citizen again and live their life.
Gosh, the way they portray veterans on TV is we're all crazy. We're all, all about to snap.
What the media is the media, right? And then the government, rightly so, has things that it's working on to give us a technological advantage over people who aren't so friendly to us. So yeah, we have secrets as a country, but we should, because you don't want to show all of your cards. If you do, then your enemy's as good as you are. I completely believe we are the most technologically advanced nation in the world, and we have to keep that edge. Things that hurt us are, internet theft or thefts of our thinking and our design from the Chinese or from other communist governments. They steal our secrets, and we have to keep them guarded very closely. So when the media says what they say, I think they're telling the truth the best way they know how.
It exposed me to a lot of things that, good and bad, that I wouldn't have seen before, and I wouldn't be as strong as I am today without that.
You're not supposed to know where I've been and what went on, and that's all I will let you know. We're not supposed to. It's probably best that the people here don't know what goes on in a lot of places. That's one reason that your people get out of service, and a lot of them can't sleep at night. But there's pressures there that people don't see, don't know about.
I think, life's something precious and it's something to be protected. And war should be the last thing that we do. And, you can carry that into everyday life when you're dealing with the people in your community. It's how do you treat people decently and with respect, and understand that every life has a value, and no person's value is greater than another person's. So that's how I do it. No, the only thing I'd like to add is I'm really glad you're doing this documentary, because I think people that continue to bring to light soldiers and sailors and airmen and the things that they go through, the sacrifices they make, the people that continue to do that, I'm very proud of. I think, bravo to you for doing this. But at the same time, I hope as many people can see this as possible, so they can understand that what the veterans do for us is priceless. And, every chance you get, buy them a dinner, thank them. Whenever you see them in the community, help them out. Because most of them, they don't make a lot of money. They're not getting rich by being soldiers.
Is there a message that you'd want to leave to future generations who may hear or view this?
Don't lose hope. Always keep in touch as best you can, and always know that you love each other and that nothing can come between you. You just have to have hope and know that you love each other, so that nothing can separate you.